Hey, good morning, Canes. Today we're going to be looking at renewable resources, which is one of my favorite things to talk about because it's something that's like looking at innovative ways to have a sustainable Earth and be more responsible for our planet. And it's what really our whole class is about, right? We're looking at ways that we interact with our environment, but also ways we can be better, ways we can sustain it. We've studied the populations and the needs of these growing populations. Energy is one of those definite needs of populations, right? So we're going to look at ways that we can have sustainable, renewable resources to use for our energy sources, okay? So going back to renewable energy is just sources that can be constantly formed: wind, water, solar, all that type of stuff. Geothermal, all great examples of things we can use that are always available to us. So we're going to jump into solar energy, but the only a small fraction of the sun from the Earth reaches our planet, or the sun reaches our planet. That's plenty of energy to drive a solar energy industry. So, but also that solar energy, it what drives the wind. It drives plant growth through photosynthesis, that type of stuff. It drives the water cycle with the evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. All of those are renewable energy sources from the sun. So it's a lot of these sources we're going to talk about today are either directly, like solar, or indirectly, like wind and water and that type of stuff, and geothermal, are directly or indirectly related to the sun. Okay. There's two different types of solar heating. There's passive and there's active. There are other names for those, but in our class, just know passive and active. And just look at like what they mean. Passive, not doing much, and active, doing something, right? So passive, it uses the sun's energy directly to heat something, okay? That's when it comes down, hits the glass, and it heats up that area, right? Active is when you use that solar energy to gather it, and it heats water up, or to heat a building. So like you could have the kind that's on top of roofs that just goes directly into electricity, or the large fields that collect the energy and use that heat to actually boil water and cause steam to turn that turbine that's so needed to make electricity. All right, the next one is wind power. Wind power is pretty simple. I mean, it's basically a big windmill that's turning, and that's the turbine turning. So it converts the movement of that wind into that electrical energy, like we looked at with the non-renewables. You turn on that turbine and making that generator create electricity. So wind power is the fastest growing energy source in the world. All right, there's a couple of downfalls to it. You have noise pollution, which we've talked about. And also you can kill birds. It's a low risk, but it can kill birds. Also, it just sort of takes away from the scenery for like humans' enjoyment of the scenery. I mean, it does, and it is what it is. Wind farms, there's large farms. You have them in the ocean. Like this is a great picture here. I think this is a really cool picture looking here. But it's out in the ocean. They also have them in like the Midwest, out in the flatlands. So a place like California had these large supplies. And California can power 280,000 homes with these large farms. So small farms, those are ones more for like rural areas, okay? Biomass is another non-renewable energy source. That's like using compost and like plant material, manure, and other organic things to burn, basically, to cause a source. But wood and dung are renewable resources, but you're burning stuff, so you do have a little bit of pollution coming there. Remember, we talked about this. Anytime you burn anything, you're creating some kind of pollution, right? But you're not going to be creating this huge coal, like what it would be with the carbon, right? So you're creating some particulate pollution, but you're not having this huge carbon deposit you're doing. Hydroelectric, what it sounds like, hydro water electric. So it's like the Hoover Dam out near Las Vegas. Great example of hydroelectric dam. This is energy produced by that moving water. The moving water, guess what it's doing? It's turning a turbine. So it's renewable, right? There are a couple of downfalls to it. It's really, really expensive to build, right? A big dam is expensive, but it's also really inexpensive to operate, okay? But there are some other issues like we talked about this. We talked about dams. It's going to stop the sediment from flowing downriver. It impedes a lot of fish from going upriver to spawn. So there are some things that are downfalls to it. But hydroelectric dams last longer than fuel burning power plants do. I mean, once you get it built, it lasts and it runs pretty well, and it's pretty inexpensive to run after you get it built. Again, some of the disadvantages we talked about: dams can burst. You change that river flow system. You create reservoirs. So a lot of things like that. Geothermal, we're going to look at this on Friday with a movie clip, but geothermal is pretty cool. It's using the heat from the Earth's core, Earth's crust, really. Iceland does an excellent job of using geothermal. Their entire country is ran on geothermal energy. Way different than the U.S., much smaller population, and they have geothermal everywhere. But it's really cool ideas, all right? But it can the steam is collected, turns a turbine, makes electricity. Alternative energy sources are also things that are still in development. So geothermal is still in development in a lot of the world. Like Hawaii is experimenting with it, and a lot of places in the Ring of Fire out in the Pacific are experimenting with it. But Iceland powers there a lot. They power their whole country with renewable resources, mostly geothermal. Tidal power is very similar to wind, but it's underwater. All right. So tidal power is the movement of water going across those turbines and spinning that turbine, and it's creating that generation. There are